Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar about using our IBM Cloud Object Storage as a great or a more performant storage tool, an enterprise-grade file storage with the help of Storage Made Easy. I'm Manuel Daza, Cloud Platform Sales Specialist for Europe from the IBM Cloud Unit, and we have here today with us Jim Little, CEO of Storage Made Easy. On the agenda for today, and good morning, Jim. On the agenda for today, I will make a brief introduction about IBM Cloud and the Object Storage Unit, and then I will handle the control to Jim, who will present us their solution, Storage Made Easy solution, then the challenges they found, and how they put in place their solution, and we will also see a live demo. So, starting with IBM Cloud point of view, the truth is that IBM Cloud offering has grown really a lot in the past years. So in some cases, thanks to acquisitions, and in some cases due to own development from IBM. We can see this image, this picture is very descriptive. I will go for the key parts, and then I will go over, because we have already develop or run many webinars just focused on IBM Cloud or SoftLayer or Bluemix or any other particular tool. So let's keep generic, and so we can focus on the Storage Made Easy solution for today. Well, you can see that on the base of our portfolio, of our offering, we had a Cloud Object Storage as a storage over what we will build the rest of our solution. On top of that, we have the computing side, which is either SoftLayer, now called Bluemix Infrastructure, or Bluebox, which is private cloud. In all of those cases, we are talking about computing power, networking, and also storage, which will be in combination with IBM Cloud Object Storage. On top of that, so up to the level, we are talking about infrastructure as a service. On top of that, we have, which is called Bluemix Platform as a Service, or PaaS. We will have then a really great choice of runtime environments. We will have a huge catalog of applications and services, not only from IBM, but also from third parties. And then we will be able to create our own applications, our own services that we will be able to put on that same Bluemix catalogs, for example. Looking at the left and on the right, we can see DevOps tools. We know how important DevOps are nowadays for every developer, and how those tools can help them improve and speed up their processes. On the right, there is a rectangle where we can see some different tools for integration, especially for API management. We all know how important is the API economy today. Some keys. Choice with consistency. It's completely open, so you can select what kind of approach you want for your cloud. And then it's completely integrated. It's not just focusing on infrastructure or just focusing on platform, but on everywhere. All that is supported by our integrated global network. It's a private global network that cover all the world, connecting all of our 47 data centers worldwide. One of the key points of this, or the key advantages of this network, is that we have free traffic between data centers. So today we will be talking about storage, meaning that if we have some machines in, for example, in Frankfurt, and we have some servers in Dallas, we can have all the traffic flowing freely and without having to pay, without cost, between those data centers. Perfect for disaster recovery, backups, and some other storage solutions. We have seen that in the past years, the content is growing really a lot. In some cases, thanks to or due to video, which is much more storage consumer than other formats we were using before. With some figures that we have taken from independent reports, we've seen that by 2020, We expect to have 75 billion of internet-connected devices with will be delivering 80% of unstructured data. Bear in mind, please, that 90% of all data that we currently store has been created in the past 2 years, and it's growing rapidly and even time faster. Then we know that nowadays the data is the key of our business. We can have a very good infrastructure, we can have a very good business idea, but then if we lose the data, if we lose the control over our customers' information, etc., if we have a security breach, for example, all that is exposed and our business can go down completely. So we need to be sure that we are offering and we are having a secure environment. Especially, we need to be sure that we can scale up our infrastructure when we need to store more data in a more secure way and more accessible always. Then we have two different approaches: on-premise, which is the legacy or the traditional approach, or the cloud. Every one of them having different advantages and disadvantages. For example, if we think on the traditional storage, it's not thought for scaling up. If we want another machine, we have to buy the full machine. However, if you take the traditional cloud, we have some disadvantages, like, okay, it can scale up or down very fast, but then we cannot have the choice of if I want to mix hybrid, mixing on-premise and off-premise, and we can have the risk of suffering a vendor locking. So to avoid that, IBM developed his version of object storage. Object storage is thought just for objects, I mean for static data, not dynamic data. When we think in objects or in static data, we are thinking multimedia content, for example, files like videos, audios, texts that can be accessed many times but will not be changed many times. We can think, for example, the best example could be, for example, YouTube, where there are lots of people uploading content, but it's only one request of upload, and then when it finishes, the full video is already available on YouTube, and thousands or millions of people can access that object, that video, that will not be modified subsequently. Very different of that could be, for example, a database or an Excel sheet or any other format that can be modified very often as people access. So for dynamic data like databases, we have file storage. For static data, we have object storage. And then we have the evolution. We can have, with IBM Cloud Object Storage, we can have a version for on-premise, so having a better performance, a low latencies, etc. We have off-premise option with lower costs and much better scalability. And of course, we can have the hybrid version. Let's develop a little bit more that. With the on-premise version, we have the security of being a single-tenant machine and single-tenant device, which is specifically designed to fit our needs. On the other hand, on the other side, we have the off-premise. And here I have split it into dedicated or public, because we can have those two options. We can select when we want to be single tenant, even being on the cloud, or when we can or we want to be multi-tenant, so public cloud. Of course, the main differences will be the performance and the price. The best of that is that we can mix all of them. We can have on-premise and we can have dedicated cloud and public cloud. This brings us to build the perfect hybrid object storage solution. Of course, IBM is doing the management, is managing the storage part, so you only have to access it and use it without having to worry of how it is redundant or how it's growing or how it's maintained. Let's see a little bit better how it works. Imagine that we have 1 terabyte of usable data. With a traditional approach, it would be replicated 3 times, resulting in 3.6 terabytes, for example, of raw storage, because it will be on 3 different disks with a RAID file or a system, or, for example. So at the end, we are triplicating the space we need. With the new approach, with IBM Cloud Storage, there is no real need to replicate data, because what we do is we slice and we first encrypt and then slice that data, that blocks of data, creating, for example, 12 blocks of data. Then those 12 blocks are, or 12 slides, are distributed and stored on different locations, on different units that can be accessible at any time. The total storage used is 1.7, so near a 40% less than with a traditional approach. One of the other advantages is, in case we need to recover that, even if we have lost some of the slice, we can still recover the whole part. So at the end, is around 40% less storage, meaning in around 70% of lower total cost of ownership. What does it mean to IT? First, we need less storage than with the traditional approach. Less storage also means less power, less floor space, and less software to manage. But since we have less infrastructure, it also means less downtime, or even no downtime, because it's all automated and managed by IBM, by the way. So, summarizing, we have a better scalability, we have a huge security, because it's not only redundant, but it's also encrypted. We have better reliability and availability, because since the slices are split on different geographical locations, they can be always accessible. And since we can, let's use the word risk, to lose some of those slices, we can always recover everything from the rest of slices. Then it's more easily manageable, because we don't have to think on RAIDs or the different schemes to replicate everything. That part is completely done by IBM, and you only have to use it. You only have to put your data there, and IBM does the redundancy and that the encryption and all which is needed. And at the end, it's meaning more efficient, since we have less storage used, less physical amount of terabytes used, or petabytes, so less power, less all the rest, cooling, floor space. At the end, a lower TCO and a better service to the customer. I will now hand the word to Jim. So Jim, you can go.
Okay, thank you. So I'll tell you a little bit about Storage Made Easy and how that works with IBM Cloud Storage. So the company Storage Made Easy was founded in 2009 by myself and my co-founder. We launched our first product at the end of 2012, and we've now been, fairly successful in that we've got over 100 enterprise customers and ISPs with our on-premise enterprise appliance. We've got 300,000 users hosted on our SaaS service, of which there are around 5,000 plus businesses using this, many of them using it with object storage. In terms of what we do, we talk about providing a file fabric, a software solution that enables enterprises to unify their different data sources, manage them, and secure them. So ultimately, when we talk about a file fabric, we're talking about a horizontal overlay that is able to talk to all corporate data sources, whether they're in on-premise or on cloud, in a vendor-neutral way, and connecting them so we can provide a single place for governance and compliance, which is increasingly important in today's world. We have a particular focus on making object storage accessible and usable within the enterprise. We often talk about delivering the last mile of object storage. What that means is that delivering it into the end user's hands so that they can use it and it is really truly accessible within the enterprise. Next slide, please. Manuel talked earlier about the amount of storage increasing, partly obviously due to the digital nature of the world today, but it's quite incredible when you think that the data we're creating and copying is going to reach 44 zettabytes by 2020. And I had to go and check what a zettabyte was, and that's 44 trillion gigabytes. That's an incredible amount of data. And it's incredible to think about 1/3 of this data will actually pass through the cloud and through systems like IBM's Cloud Object Storage. Of course, that needs to be efficient. And Manuel talked earlier about the erasure coding and how that makes the software-defined storage incredibly cost-efficient and also space-efficient. And I think all of the analysts agree that unstructured data, that's data like files, PowerPoints, Office, video, etc., is growing very rapidly, 40 to 60% every year. And of that, enterprises are accountable for about 80% of that data. So it's clear that there is a challenge around how we can store this, make it accessible very quickly, but also work with it in a paradigm that we're used to, or that we've been used to with things like file and block storage. Next slide, please. So we're talking today about the joint solution, how Storage Made Easy brings enterprise file governance and secure access to IBM Cloud Object Storage environments, in the enterprise and for ISPs. That's really the focus of this, and also, at the end of this short set of slides, there'll be a demo showing how that actually works in action. But the main premise for us is this challenge of how do you make large amounts of data secure, governed, available to IT to set policies and if needed restrictions, and how do you deliver that easily to the end users so that they're able to work with it. Next slide, please. So one of the things that has occurred certainly recently with the plethora of consumer sharing file services is the concept of shadow IT, which essentially is users taking into their own hands apps and services to make it easier for them to work, essentially. Many things in the enterprise can be locked down. Sometimes the user just wants to do things very, very efficiently and quickly. And what that often means is that you end up in a situation where you've got information leak, governance and compliance issues. We already know that company data is spread across silos. Almost every company, even small companies, have more than one data source. Traditionally that was on-premise with Windows filers, FTP, WebDAV. Increasingly it's becoming cloud. Not just Cloud Object Storage, but also SaaS applications that store data. Salesforce, for example, Basecamp. Applications that actually hold on to data. In a recent survey on data privacy and security standards, 58% of users said that they were using third-party cloud apps for sharing corporate data. So that's corporate information leak of data going outside of the enterprise in a way that's uncontrolled and unsanctioned. And the challenge for IT, particularly as we get more and more compliant standards, is how do they control that? And how do they control it in the way that is holistic, is consistent, and works across all of their different data sources? It's no good being able to say you have to move the data over here if you want it to be governed and controlled, because the reality is users are never going to work like that. In the same survey, 70% of CIOs said they were concerned about data security. They don't know what they don't know, essentially. In terms of the control of data outside the company, 65% of users said they were using unsanctioned file sharing tools, and I probably would argue that the 35% just didn't admit it. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we believe is needed is to understand that there are going to be silos inside of an enterprise, that there are going to be very different experiences and different applications and services. Increasingly object storage because of the cost and space benefits, but there will still be things like Windows filers, and there'll still be things like alfresco sitting in the corner, etc. And you need to be able to provide a very consistent experience to the end user to be able to work with those different sets of data, but also providing them a consumer-grade experience, because otherwise they will likely take to using third-party unsanctioned apps. Next slide, please. And the way that SME approaches that is to provide a software solution that essentially unifies these different corporate data sources and provide a single platform to be able to add security and governance policies and to integrate in a way that enables end users to work with it as if they were working with more consumer-grade type things. Access to it over mobile apps, access to it through desktop, but with very strict controls and audit from IT. So that if there is a compliance request, if there's a legal hold request, if there's a need to understand what the end-to-end access of a file was for certain regulations such as HIPAA or FIPS or things that are going on in Europe, then it's very, very easy to do. Next slide, please. In terms of the data security features, they're very intense and fully featured in the product. There is a full file event auditing of all of the data sources that are mapped to the SME solution. These can be essentially handed off in an Excel file for a compliance officer on demand. They can also be incorporated into corporate BAM dashboards in syslog format. There's the ability to set policies, which we'll look at later in the demo. There's the ability to set IT or user-controlled encryption, very strong encryption over and above any encryption at rest. There's vertical functionality in terms of specific things such as legal hold and DLP. There are things such as file versioning and locking, and of course in a solution such as this there's a way to be able to share files but in a secure way that has policies set against them that is audited and tracked. Next slide, please. Also, of course, we understand that people within the enterprise are going to want to share and collaborate not only with people internally but also with people externally. Next slide, please. And the SME solution is very fully featured in terms of collaboration. It integrates directly with LDAP and Active Directory or SAML systems. It provides shared team folders based on roles that can be brought in from LDAP or Active Directory, or using its own authentication system if LDAP and Active Directory are not present within the organization. It has a very different model to collaborate externally. It doesn't assume that you may want to just share a folder. You can set up a private workspace like an e-room or a data room to collaborate with external participants, or alternatively you can set up what we call a drop folder with very strict controls, and we'll look at that a little later in the demo. It also has things like web office editing, cloud or desktop editing, PDF annotations, and things like file comments and bookmarks, although it works with best of breed bookmark type tools like Evernote that can be brought in as a data source. Next slide, please. The other, obviously the big concern, especially in the US but coming across to Europe, is how to protect against ransomware. Next slide, please. And the way that SME does that is that it's able to provide an archive of anything that's used from a primary data source. So this is different to the erasure coding that Manuel was talking about earlier. This is actually really keeping a replicated copy somewhere, so that if you want to, if for any reason you get attacked by ransomware, you can easily roll back to get a real-time version of all your files. Next slide, please. So what do we bring to the IBM Cloud? One of the use cases that we see very strongly inside of the enterprise is taking object storage and doing something strategic with it, which is something over and above just backup. This is what we call the home file replacement, which is lots and lots of corporate data sat on Windows filers that can cost a lot to operate, or sat on SANs or NAS, which can cost a lot to operate, but wanting to move it across to the object storage because it's cheaper and more cost efficient, and save space, but still needing to have their users access it the same way that they did with File Block. You know, that's one of the things that we definitely facilitate very well, that hopefully will come out in the demo. We are also able to provide the type of governance and compliance, you know, for all types of storage, including IBM Cloud Object Storage, that is needed in today's age. And the product itself still features access for maybe what could be called legacy protocols today, such as WebDAV, FTP, SFTP, and S3. In fact, we've got some use cases where people use, you know, they've moved data from FTP, they've put it inside of the object storage, but they're still giving their customers access to it over FTP like they used to when they had an FTP server. All of that can be facilitated with our product, and of course, as it's integrated with Active Directory, there can even be strictly controlled permissions against what's exposed using the Active Directory system. And of course, the other thing that we do is we integrate with content search. Inbuilt into the product is Apache Solr, which means we can index all that structured data to get access when you do a search in the content itself. And lastly, you know, back to the home filer or delivering the last mile of storage to the end user, we try and provide an integrated desktop experience, which means that users get drives, you know, home filer drive replacement. We integrate into things like Office, we have Outlook integration, and we'll bring that type of thing out in the demo. So I think Manuel's just going to hand over control to me. So we're now here at the public hosted site, and I'm going to sign in with my SME demo account. Once signed in, you will see that we're welcomed. This is what's known as a widget editor. It's great for intranets. It allows admins to be able to give customized messages to end users. It's easily controlled, and you can add a number of different widgets, such as RSS feeds of the corporate accounts, Twitter feeds, etc. And you can even design your own, because this is just a JavaScript container. So I'm logged in as the cloud or IT admin, and the first thing I need to do is to add some storage to allow my users to be able to use it. So to do that, I can go to my dashboard, and I can add a new, what we call a provider or a connector, and in this case I'm going to choose software, and then this will invoke a wizard which I can follow. So I'll add my software authentication endpoint, and then I will add my software username. Once that's done, I'll validate it, and I can choose to change the default container name that is created. I will just make it SME IBM demo. And we continue, and then the next thing that will occur is that SME will go away and it will index any storage that is already on the software system. In our case, this is a brand new storage instance, so there's nothing there, so we can see it completed very quickly. And as soon as that's added, it's available in the SME file manager on the web, and we can see it's now here. We'll also see that we've got an extra entry, which is where I'm managing my on-premise files. From the file manager, I can also move to a more hierarchical view, in which there's some default folder names for special circumstances such as locked files or encrypted files or any contacts or email backups I may have made. These can be hidden if they're not required, but they're there by default. I can move back from the hierarchical view to the simple flat view, and this can be controlled for all users, Remember, right now I'm operating in the team admin mode. And once here, I can decide about creating some shared folders that will allow my users to be able to work with the system. Before we start, let's take a look at the view that we see in Software Direct. Right now, this is the software view. So I'm inside of the default container in London because that's the regional endpoint that I chose. And all I have right now here is the SME IBM demo container that we created earlier and no objects. And we'll take another look at this view once we've created some shared team folders and added some files. Right now though, we'll flip back to our file manager and we'll create some shared team folders. So we'll create a folder and we'll call it projects. And we'll create two more, one called marketing and one called HR. If we flick back to our software view and we do a refresh, we'll see that indeed those three folders have been created. Now we'll add some files to populate the folders that we created. And one of the ways you can do this is directly from the web view. I prefer to do it from the hierarchical view. You can simply navigate to your file system and you can drag the files across. It's pretty easy, pretty intuitive, and the files will be uploaded in parallel one by one. Once the files have completed, they'll of course be available in the object store, but they won't be available to end users because by default shared team folders are permissive. So if you have added some users and you do start adding team folders, nobody will be able to get access to them until you create shared permissions. There are of course other ways to get files into your folders. We've looked at drag and drop onto the web, but one of the other ways of doing it is actually doing it through what we call the cloud drive. The SME Cloud Drive is a desktop integrated drive for Windows, Mac and Linux that we provide that really brings the object storage into the desktop for the end user. We often talk about delivering the last mile of object storage, and what that means is that object storage provides a great mechanism to fulfill the storage requirement, but getting it to the end user is often the difficult part. And the drives actually provide a great way of being able to do that. So they integrate directly in the desktop. To the end user, they just look like another home filer drive, and they can click on them and get access to data quite quickly. And the other great thing about them is that data isn't replicated down. It functions like a true network drive, so it brings the data down on demand. And when you're dealing with object storage, quite often you have very large amounts of data to the hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes or petabytes. So it's not really possible to work in the Dropbox sync mode when you're dealing with that sort of data. You need to be able to browse it and pull it down on demand. Having said that, SME does have a Dropbox sync-like tool as well, which users can map to certain amounts of that object storage to replicate and work with offline if they choose to. So to do this, we will be working with our Finder, which is similar to Windows Explorer on Windows, and we'll just take the files that we have here in project, we'll copy them, and then we'll move down to our storage drive, and as you see, it's got the same file layout that we see on the web. If we go to my software files and the container view, I will go straight into projects and I'll simply paste the items in. And the files are delivered straight into the object storage directly from the user's desktop. Of course, the other way that we can get files into our system is by navigating to some of the other stores that we have already mapped. So I said earlier that I'd mapped on-premise files. I have a couple of white papers in there that really should be in the marketing folder. So I can simply select those and I can drag them across to marketing, and they'll be moved directly from my Windows file share directly across to the marketing folder. And that's a great way to be able to move data around. And one of the things about the SME system is that everything you do is governed. So first of all, I can see that there is a task currently in place. That task is copying the data from my on-premise server across to my software object storage. It's 50% complete right now. And also, everything is audited and governed. So I can go to my audit logs and I can see that in the SME system, everything that I've done, moving files from one place to another, so that's the two files I've just moved, and these are the uploads I processed earlier, also with the IP address and the date. So I can export this as a CSV file or as an XLS file, and I can hand it off to a compliance officer. And also, as an admin, I can integrate this into my syslogs and expose it in a more holistic corporate BAM dashboard if I choose to do so. If I go back to my file manager now, and I go back into the folder we just looked at, which was the marketing folder, then what I'll see is that the marketing folder now contains a copy of those two documents that I've just moved across. So that was pretty easy. I moved it from my on-premise files directly onto the object storage. So once we have the information in the object storage, we can actually interact with it directly from this view. So we can preview the files pretty easily directly from the web browser. We can find out information about them, how many times they've been downloaded and shared links, what geo restrictions or geo information they are. We can add comments, review comments. So it's pretty easy to work with files, and we can keep this preview mode open, and we can flick between different files, and depending on what the file is, we'll get an ability to interact with it, get a preview. It's a nice collaboration view on top of the actual object storage itself. Of course, we don't have to interact with the data just through the web. We can use the integrated desktop tools. So if we were to go back to our Storage Made Easy drive where we just dropped these files, and we double-clicked on the Word document, for example, then we would go back to the object storage, we would pull that document down, and it would open directly in Word. And if we made a change and saved that file, then it would be saved back directly to the object storage. So the end user would really be the no wiser. They could interact with the data directly from the desktop, just as they would with their home file drives. So it really does deliver the object storage directly into the end user. Also, of course, all of the interactions from the desktop or the mobile or the web, of course, they're all securely audited and logged. The other things that users will want to do is to securely share files. And to be able to do that, you can do that using URLs, or the system can deliver an email directly to the user. One of the things you can do is to set policies for end users around how they're able to share files. You can decide whether a certain file expires after a time period. You can limit the download perhaps to 1, so that if somebody forwards the email, then the link that's generated can be used again. And you can also set a password so that the end user will need the password to be able to access the link. You can actually turn off file sharing altogether for end users if you wish to, or you can make it very, very locked down. So it's entirely up to the IT admin as to how they want this to work. But it does make sharing of links more secure than just allowing users to share files. It can also track the link, it can record the IP address, you can set passwords, you can make sure that the link gets into the hands of the person it's meant to and not into any other hands. The other thing we can do is we can share folders for external collaboration, or to enable people to drop some files into a folder with very limited permissions. So to be able to do something like that, if we go to, for example, the marketing folder and we click to share the folder, we can share this folder by URL. We can again set the options about when it can be set to expire. So maybe we just going to let it do 1 day. And then we can choose to set it as a drop folder. This means that people can actually put files into it. They don't need to log in, they don't need to have an account, but they will need a password. So if we set a password, also you'll notice an option to hide files. That means if the folder already has files in it, don't show them to the user who's going to drop some more files in it. You can do this with existing folders, or you can do this with new folders. Once we generate the link is available. Here, we can copy it, and then actually what an end user would see is a password. Once they enter the password, they'd be able to browse the folder and then add some files to it. in our case, we enabled them to see the files that were already in the folder. Of course, we didn't need to. Of course, most users will spend most of their time inside of their email accounts when they're sharing files. And the Storage Made Easy tool suite integrates directly into best-of-breed emails, such as, for example, Outlook, which is what I'm in right now, and also MacMail. And you get some new buttons inside of your emails when you click New Email. And if you click the Share from Cloud, then we get the same view as we got when we were in the Drive or in the Web view. And we can simply go inside of our shared folders and we can choose to share a file. And when we share a file, we get the same options that we got previously. We can generate a short link directly inside of an email. So it's very consistent in terms of what the user experience is, and all of this is audited and available directly from that audit view that we saw earlier. The mail integration also extends to MacMail. Here we see the same view. We can go straight into our software view, and again we can choose to share files directly. We of course see exactly the same type of file share policies that we saw before. In this case, no policies have been preset, so that enables me to decide how I want this file to be shared. And the file is entered directly into Mail. SME is actually one of the few tools that integrates the share links directly in this way, directly into MacMail. These types of integrations are, of course, again, all aimed at delivering the last mile of object storage directly to the end user and providing this consumer type experience, but based on corporate enterprise data. The solution itself is designed with mobility in mind. In fact, the actual web interface will change depending on what type of device it's viewed on. It can be viewed on phones, or indeed it can be viewed on tablets, etc. However, SME also comes with mobile applications for iPad, iOS, iPhone, Android, Windows Phone, and also BlackBerry. And the application types themselves are quite rich. So, for example, on the iPad, one of the things we can do is launch SME, and when we're in, we get the same view that we got from the web. And indeed, pretty much from a user perspective, everything is the same. We can see we've got a comment on one of the files that we made a comment on earlier, and we've got an ability to go and view the file if we wish to, or indeed, we can share it, and you'll be not surprised to see that the sharing options are pretty much the same sharing options that we've seen in the other apps, tools, and web interface. The other thing about this particular medium is that you can do some nice things, like, for example, you can set up a folder sync. So you can sync down software files for on-the-move use directly on your iPad or your Android, both on the tablets and on the phone. And there are other options to do indeed with media, with memos, with voice memos, etc., all of which would end up being stored directly on software. So it's a very nice device to be able to work on the move. Also, what I can show you in this iPad mirroring is how it integrates with Microsoft Word. So if we launch Microsoft Office, in this case Microsoft Word, and we go on to the More in the Provider page, because SME is implemented as a document provider, we can actually go directly into our back-end software object storage, and we can start to access our files. Now that's pretty great, because we don't even have to go through SME. We're in a totally third-party app, and we're accessing the documents that are stored on the back-end object storage. And even better, every access is being audited and logged. And you can see here on the document, the change that we made earlier on the desktop version of Word is now available through the Microsoft Office version of Word. So that's, again, it's back to this, the ability to extend this idea of a corporate Dropbox or a consumer file sharing sync type approach into the enterprise, so that users totally buy into its use, but IT has a total end-to-end security pathway of everything that's being used. One of the other things that I should point out is that the SME product works very well with third-party enterprise apps. So for example, MDM solutions that might be already implemented in the enterprise, Storage Made Easy plays quite well with those. In fact, it's got some default integrations with things such as Mobile Iron, in which it can be used side by side. So you get the benefits of all the audit logging and this holistic security blanket that wraps itself around corporate data, and you also get the benefits of those types of MDM tools that very much that containerize applications. I mentioned earlier that we were logged in as the IT admin. The IT admin, rather than just seeing the file manager, which is what users see, also has some additional options. All of these options that are marked organization. We looked at one of these earlier with regards to audit logs, but what I'd like to do is take a quick look at the options. These are all the options that the IT admin has with regards to changing things on the system. And they're organized into very distinct sections. The first one of which is user governance, which means that you can decide here what governance settings that you want to set for end users. The next is the file sharing policy. I mentioned earlier that you can preset file sharing policies, so you could make it a requirement that a password is required for shared links, or that indeed shared links must expire, for example, in 1 day. You might always limit the number of downloads, etc. Then we have the security options. The security options allow you to do things like force strong passwords, turn on two-factor authentication, only allow authentication from certain IP addresses. Encryption, the IT admin can make sure that all of the files that are encrypted at rest with an encryption key set that is kept within the SME solution. The solution also supports versioning and trash. Here you control the versioning and trash options. How many versions are allowed? When do they get reaped? Is trash allowed? How does that work, etc. And then there are some more sections down here relating to things to do with search. One of the things I haven't talked about is that the whole solution becomes integrated with content search, which allows you to search the actual contents of files which are indexed on upload. The actual IT admin has a very granular ability as well to control what the users see. If they want the users to see the bare minimum, they can turn on the simplify user view, which means that the user will get the file manager and not much else. And the IT admin also controls things like notifications and has some control over branding. You can see here that I chose to brand this with IBM Cloud for the IBM demo, and indeed that homepage widget that you saw, this is actually where it was set. One last thing I'd like to talk about now is ransomware. Ransomware, many people will now know of, and they'll have read some things in the press, and if they've really been unlucky, they'll have been subject to it. Ransomware is one of these things that everyone talks about, but when it actually happens to you, it's a real problem. So given the fact that we're working with drives and we're working with data and we're integrating the desktop, how do we protect against ransomware? Ransomware works by infecting files, locking them, and then the ransomers issue a demand to get the files unlocked. So one of the ways that you can protect against this is to make sure that you have archived or backup copies of the file structures. And I'm going to show you how you can do that with SME. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to go back into the dashboard. And from the dashboard, I'm going to add a backup for my software. It's going to be actually another software account, except this time rather than being in London, I'm going to choose Amsterdam. And we go through a very similar set of details before. Here's a backup for software files. I'm going to add the authentication endpoint. This time the behavior is slightly different in that it's asking me where do I want to save my backup files. So I'm going to call this SME archive for IBM demo. Now at the point that I hit continue this time, what's going to happen is going to be a little different from before. What it's going to do is it's going to create a task to move, or copy rather, all of the files from the primary provider, which in this case is my software in London, and it's going to copy those back to my archive provider. And therein, it will take any new files and it will also copy them across to the archive provider, giving me an exact mirror copy of what I've got in my London container. Now, this is also applicable to things other than obviously software. If you had a Windows file server, which are often prone to be hit by ransomware, you could set that up as a SIFT provider in our system. And you could set software as the archive or backup provider for that. And then all of those files would have a replica copy on software. So in the event that you ever got hit with a ransomware demand or for any reason were targeted, then you know that you would always have a copy that you could get back. One of the things we can do now is we can go back into the file manager and we can take a look at the tasks view. And what we should see is some tasks that have been done with regards to syncing software, to the archive cloud. And we can see that it's processed the files and that's been completed. From now on, every time we upload a new file, as normal to our London, our primary storage, it will automatically be copied across to what's in the Amsterdam container. So the last thing I'd like to do before I end the demo is go back to our software view and take another look at the direct view of the storage. So we're now in London, and here we've got our folders. You see we've got another one called .trash. I think I talked to you earlier about the options where you can decide what you want to do with trash. In my particular case, trash is on, so that any files deleted go into .trash before I decide to empty them. If we check inside of things like HR, we'll see the files that we already know are there from our web view. So London is as expected. If we go back to our cluster and we now take a look at Amsterdam, what we should see is a replica view of what we have in London. Here is the archive IBM demo that we created. We should see a similar structure to what we had in London. So again, here are the files that were automatically moved across from the London container. So they were copied. They're an exact replica. They're untouchable from the point of view of a ransomware attack because they're totally archived. They're not exposed in any way. And inside of the actual SME solution, in the event that such an attack happened, we can basically flip this around so you get back access to all of the files. So it's a very good solution for things like ransomware. It's a very good solution for something like eArchive. One last thing I'd like to point out is, as you will see, all of the files that you're seeing here are exactly as you uploaded them. We haven't turned them into any acronyms or any hieroglyphics. I point that out because there are quite a few solutions out there that when they do the file upload, they tamper with the file names and they put metadata into them, and you can no longer understand them. And that locks you into that solution. Therein, if you want to really understand your file structures, you need that solution to be able to decipher them. SME is meant to be an open solution, so that if you took SME out the mix, you'd easily be able to understand the file structures that you've got inside of your software. So it's not proprietary in that sense, it's totally open. And we keep all of our metadata in a database, not actually inside of the files itself or inside of the file names itself. So that was really a whistle-stop tour of the SME solution. We covered quite a bit, but there was a lot we didn't cover. We didn't cover Active Directory or LDAP integration. We didn't cover protocol gateways. There was quite a lot that we ended up missing out. 20 minutes is all we had. We packed quite a lot into that. Hopefully it was useful, and now we'll jump back to the slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. I go back to the last slide. Thank you very much again for your live demo. Just a couple of questions that were pointed out from your explanations. You mentioned the backup option. Is it just a backup for object storage? I mean, I have a object storage unit and I can back it up on another location, or can we in fact do backup from virtual machines storage or bare metal servers?
So we can obviously at the end of the demo there I showed the ability to do archive or backup, from any of the primary data sources that we support, and we support around 55 of those. From on-premise to on-cloud. So if you make one of those your primary data source and then you add a secondary data source like we did in the demo, then it will basically copy that data across to the archive or backup dependent on the rules that you set. So it's not just restricted to object storage.
Great. You mentioned just now the rules. Does it mean it can be automated or scheduled, right?
Well, if you're working in the way that I just showed you, it's real time. So
Okay.
it will occur if you add a new file, then that file will instantly create what we call a cloud task, and then it will copy that file across in the background. Because obviously if you get hit with a ransomware attack, you need the latest copies of your files. You don't want to be missing some. But
Exactly.
on our enterprise on-premise version, we do indeed have a scheduler so that you could make it not real time and schedule it on demand.
Last question is regarding the privacy. You mentioned already something. Let's say that, for example, we choose to have the storage in US because, I don't know, because prices are lower or for any other reasons. How it would comply with privacy regulations? It would be related to what you show in the demo about geolocation, IP lock, and all that, right?
It is, yeah. So you can set up geo restrictions for roles or for users, and also for IPs, which means that dependent on what location they are, they can't access certain files and folders, for example. So that's very easily done within the system.
Okay. Thank you very much for all your explanations and your live demo. It was really interesting. In fact, I leave for everybody here the key contacts. We are working together, Giada and myself, so you can address your questions or your cases to any one of us. Just to mention that we can start working right now. It can be directly for yourself. I mean, if you want to act as an end user, you can be offering this service to your users or your employees. But if you are a business partner, you can also be using or offering this solution to your customers. In any case, Diana and myself will be very pleased to take all your questions and cases and to work with you. And this recording will be available on YouTube, and also you will receive an email where you can access to the presentation. Thank you very much once again to everybody for attending today, and hopeful to work with you soon. Bye. Have a nice day.
Thanks. Bye.